Um, well, the first question I actually have is who out of all of you actually knows each other already?
I think I've met Ra before. Oh, sorry.
I know Ra too.
Ra, I've seen you, but I don't know you. And Kara, I know.
Yes, ditto Rashid. And I've seen your name, Ra, before in many different places.
Yeah, so
and I know
don't
Logan.
Yeah, so I don't know Kara or, well, I've seen Rashid, of course. Yeah.
I know Angel, who knows Sabrina, I believe.
The connection.
I think, was Tough Gossamer your videographer on one of your pieces?
Yeah.
Sabrina, okay, so I know Tough as well.
Side note, I just ran into Tough like a day or two ago. I was skating with Jordan Deal in West Philly and I ran into Tough. But that's a side note.
What a moment.
I'm like,
yeah. Well, it's actually interesting that Tough and Angel came up because something, Sabrina, that I noticed with your work is that you're supported with so many collaborators. So like doing the videography, or I know there's a image that's in the show of you doing a performance for activation residency. And that when you did that performance, Angel was also there doing like movement things with you. I know that collaboration might seem like very intrinsic to your practice, but could you just talk a little bit about what it means for you to be like in community with these other artists?
Of course. I feel like when I'm creating with other artists, especially other Black, queer, and trans artists, it's like, it's magic. It doesn't matter what we are even doing. We could just be spitballing or just making stuff up. And I just feel like once we come together, we always create something that afterwards I'm like, wow, like, look at what we can do. Look at what we can do with even the smallest amount of effort. And even with the video, it didn't really start off as like, this is going to be the video for this project. It was like, I had just bought this dress at the thrift store and I was like, let me put it on. I want to see how it looks. And then I put on the dress and I just felt like getting made up. And then Tough was like, we should make a video. And so we just started using that, like the 8mm filter on Instagram, because I've been kind of obsessed with that and have been really using it to just archive taking videos. Like I've just been taking a lot of videos with that filter. And so we were just messing around and taking videos around the yard. Since I was in that outfit, I was like, I might as well use it for something. And it just kind of happened. Like, it wasn't really, even with that, like, it wasn't very intentional, which I feel like was funny because I was thinking about like what ritual is to me. And I was like, it's always very, very intentional. But there are so many things where like we create ritual without even knowing it. And like creating ritual can look like so many different things. So I feel like collaboration in itself is part of that ritual for me, because collaboration can come in so many informal ways, whether I'm like, hey, look at this video, what do you inspire out of you? So I feel like collaboration within my art practice is something that I think is really special, because I used to be really, really private about my art. Like I never wanted people to hear me sing. I didn't want any input on anything. I'm like, no, this is mine. I don't want anyone else to touch it. So I'm grateful to be in a place where like I can play and experiment with that with other people that I love.
Yeah, like something about your work is so, I mean, in the way that I've experienced, it is so much not just about like people are watching you perform, but you're really considerate of your audience and the experience that they're having while they're watching you. Is that like, I guess I know that's important, but how did you go from that shift of feeling like really private about your work to where, to me, like a big staple of your work is like, you know, if you get to be privileged enough to be in that space where it's happening, like you are going to be part of that experience.
Honestly, I don't know what really was the bridge. I think I kind of forced myself because I used to be really just insecure about my artistic practice. I'm like, don't call me an artist. I'm just someone who's doing stuff. Like, I don't know what any of this shit is. So I feel like there wasn't really an intentional point where I was like, oh, collaboration means something to me. I want to make this happen. It just kind of happened naturally as I began to open up as a person in general and wanting to to pick other people's brains to see like, well, what does art really mean to you, or how do you interact with this space, and just seeing what kind of happened organically. And I feel like with most artists, with most performers, they understand that every performance is like a give and take, that you are giving something to the audience and they are giving something to you, and it's a constant conversation and back and forth if you're really being like present with your experience. So I feel like it just kind of happened naturally.
I want to throw it over to you, Malkia, just because in the way that Sabrina's kind of talking about like having come into that practice, I know the work that you're doing is still like relatively new to you. So can you talk a little bit about what was your, I guess the first thing I want to kind of set the stage for, I'm a little bit more familiar with it, but I think it would be helpful for people to hear about, you have a background in archaeology, and then maybe talk a little bit about the pitfalls of archaeology and maybe how that has kind of led to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so as Sabrina was talking, I was thinking about how, like, even now, still myself, I'm not even sure if I call myself an artist, or I'm still finding that bridge to being more public facing and be more collaborative and stuff like that. But my background is in archaeology and anthropology, and I worked at a museum for a while, and I worked with collections, I worked with artifacts from a lot of different countries, and I learned how to study and document and specifically digitize objects. And the way that was taught was, a way to make collections accessible, or, how do we bring collections to people? And I started to think about, like, what is a collection and what are the inherent colonial qualities of a collection and to archaeological practice in general. So when I was finishing college with this, skill set in studying material culture and stuff like that, I wanted to study my own culture more intimately and think about ways that I could sort of break apart the boundary between myself and other people from the Luo ethnic group of Kenya or other places, like breaking that boundary that separates us from our material culture. And I specifically wanted to employ digitization because I was always really interested in technology and innovative technologies, and I wasn't sure, like, if that's, how if the way that's being used right now is truly good for all parties involved. And by all parties involved, it's mostly still institutions and, colonial parties and things like that. So looking at specifically right now archives of adornment and things like that in Kenya, I wanted to play around with crafting, craft making, and ways of studying those practices and replicating them in a digital space that sort of breaks apart what is understood now as digitizing for digitizing's sake. I wanted to be like, if we are thinking about, the futurism of preserving our culture, then we need to think about it as a practice, as an active practice with agency. So I taught myself 3D modeling and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm going to try to do this with the process in mind more than the end result. And this is a practice I'm still building because eventually I would like to bring other people into it. And eventually I would like to bring craft makers into it, because right now it's still, something I'm theorizing and thinking about myself. But I found it really interesting to sort of record my process, to bring in, as mentioned in my artist statement, songs from my childhood that my dad, who's from Kenya, would, show me, and really make it a ritual experience in that, I'm sort of going into a trance as I'm putting these beads together and, not to automate the process, but think about it as if I'm doing it actually physically. And my ultimate goal is to sort of make digital craft kits and bring people together around these sort of ritual craft making practices.
Something that was from your artist statement, and there was kind of a lot of text you sent, so I didn't post everything online, but something that was so good, I was like, I really want to share this. I think this was the last sentence you wrote, was, my hope is that this is the first step in a group of Afrofuturist crafting experiments. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I thought that was so great. And it, I think Afrofuturism obviously is really big in Philly, not just here, but it really is big in the city. And the way that relates to craft is honestly new to me to think about. So I was really excited about your work in that regard. And something I'd be curious about, I would kind of leave it up to Kara, Ra, Rashid, either of you, any of you can jump in on this, is do you feel like Afrofuturism is something that relates to your practice specifically or influences you? And if so, what are the ways that it has also shaped the way you move forward in your work?
I'll ramble for a moment. Hey, y'all. Um, definitely. I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about the future. I spend a lot of time thinking about where we as Black people show up, both in sort of this big narrative, and also in our own spaces. In particular, I think I'm super curious about that with technology. I think about how Black folks, we've always, at least, the history of Black folks in America, we've always been sort of these hackers. We've been sort of taking technology that was meant for one thing, deconstructing it and reconstructing it for artistic purposes or for expression or for whatever it is. And that is like a way of crafting the future. We've had to do that because of it's like the Chitlins rule, right? But the way that we're sort of like deconstructing these like tools of mainstream or white folks, European or whatever the word is this week, and really thinking about how we can like recontextualize things. I mean, I think about DJing like that. I think about hip hop like that. I think about jazz like that. I think about rap like that. I think about so many things. I think about the church and so many art forms that happen in the church are really sort of like taking these structures and remixing them. And I'm trying to find the way for that. To me, that connects with Afrofuturism in a way of like, because we're thinking about building the future. We're sort of taking these things in and like breaking it down to sort of so much of our own culture is like these disparate remixes of what's been around with our own history, with our current interpretations. And I'm not quite sure if that answers the question, but that's sort of where my head lies around in there.
No, I think it definitely does. Like, I think something that's interesting about your work is it's so experiential for me, like to really, I mean, the videos that you make sometimes literally are up to like 2 hours long. And so one, it's experiential in that way, but two, like, it's not, it's not like you're seeing it and it's like a really kind of didactic where it's like, it's this, and then we're going to move to this idea and this idea. But it's so like, it just taps into kind of things either that you experience at some point in your life or kind of that you've never connected together, but also because it is part of your singular experience that when they're connected together, it does feel kind of whole. So I do feel like, yeah, like those connections are happening in a way that you're really good at showing in a very, I guess what's the, like visceral kind of way and kind of immediate way, which is probably similar to like, you're talking about like DJing. Obviously, church is that way. It's not like people in church like being like, well, now this is the part where we're gonna do this kind of thing and we're gonna specifically do that next and that kind of thing. Like you really just kind of let things run, and then all these things just start to manifest and come forward.
Yeah, sometimes the hope is like, again, like you said, church, and when you're in church and you think service is going to go one way, but then the Spirit moves the pastor and you roll with it, you go with it, but because the atmosphere is sort of created for that unexpected thing to happen, or for those I just that those moments of ecstasy that I think people go to church for, I think people go to parties for, I think you go to movies for, and it's like feeling out that atmosphere so those things can even be allowed to happen, and then allowing those connections, because I think those connections may, I assume, move people in different ways or invoke different things from folks, and really just, like you said, making the atmosphere and the space for those things to even happen with whatever's sort of dropped in.
Thinking about like that word ecstasy, which is such a good word. I want to throw it to you, Ra, because there have been times I've seen your performances and literally there's like, we've talked about this, but things will happen. And like, that's the only way to put it. It's just like, things are like happening. Like, so I like, something I think is really interesting is like it's so hard to put into words like what you do and what your performance style is, but I do feel like that word ecstasy is kind of interesting to like bring up in relation to your practice. And I'd be curious if you feel like, does that word have a particular resonance in the way that you think that things kind of happen? Slash, what is kind of the relationship between you as a performer, or you as a visual artist, you as, you know, all the things that you do, obviously, and the way that kind of spirit kind of gathers and releases itself in those moments?
That's a lot.
You can handle it. Come on
now. Ooh, okay. Ecstasy. So I guess it's hard because like sometimes I imagine my performances as being like specific craftings of moments of like peaks. And sometimes, as you're sort of saying, things just happen and I can't control it. And I'm so interested in ecstasy in like the daily life, the daily practice, and sort of like moments where I'm like, ooh, it's weird to language it as like losing control. But if we start to talk about spirit, I think that's kind of what happens, coming into like conversation with something else that wants to like enter my body, perhaps. And so I like when that happens in real life. And since performance is real life, it's like always on go. It always happens. I'm not sure. I'm still working out how to like craft it, right? How to like structure it and like get there. But I do think things like church, like jazz, like I guess more recently, like trap rap and like hip hop and like specifically maybe Megan Thee Stallion helped me like find ways to build and sit inside of pockets of ecstasy as opposed to like having one big moment. Having like currents perhaps. And I was thinking when you were talking about Afrofuturism, I'm very drawn to the vastness of it. I think that's sort of what I take from it most, the fact that anything is possible for the Black body. Maybe thinking of the internet as the ocean, that was just something that kind of like, I don't know, this like the idea of like this. Oh, that was cool. Wait, what was the second part of your question?
I think it was around like your performance and the way that, I think it was specifically around performance, like what it means. I guess if I can rephrase it or enter it in a different way, like something that I think is interesting, would be interesting for you to talk about is like, what is the role of self in your work? Like, I think sometimes you are like embodying, and it's not like your work is of yourself, but it's not necessarily biographical in like the way people might think. And I know there's also a little bit of kind of like mystery around all those things. So feel free to just make something up, I guess.
Oh no. Self. I think it's kind of clear that I don't inhabit like one self, right? Like I refer to myself as we all the time, which is like slightly problematic. But like I'll be like, oh, we're really gonna have tea right now, and like I'm making myself a cup of tea, or like or like if I'm watching my footage, like, oh yeah, we really did that. Ooh, that's really interesting. So if we talk about like footage and video, in terms of performance, I think I really began to build out the multiple self by literally having a second me to look at. I'm like super sad I don't have a twin. I do have two older brothers, but I wish I had a twin to like really deal with that kind of duplicity, that kind of moment of I and I. So there are at least two, but I like to consider myself three. I don't name them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that answers my question. Yeah. And then Kara, do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess you can talk a little bit about Afrofuturism, how that relates to your work, but also I feel like there's so many things that people I've said that I know are like really resonant with the work that you do, from, you know, talking about music, and that's, I know that's such a big part of your practice, but also about like improvisation and the way that you draw and spontaneity and being able to like harness that moment. Was there anything that was said in particular that you feel like, oh, you really want to speak on?
There was a lot. I was thinking about all the different directions that this conversation could take. And wow. Yeah, I'm just, if I didn't say it, nice to meet everyone who I haven't met before, and I'm glad to be here. So let me start with the Afrofuturism question. So first off, or maybe I'll even go back a little further and explain how I see myself as an artist. So I too have an anthropology background. And so in college, I did cultural anthropology, and I wanted to be an archaeologist actually. And then I went to grad school at Temple for anthropology. There was a visual communication program there. And so in my art practice, I always consider that artists are cultural producers, and that we're kind of like these like visual griots who tell stories, not only about ourselves, but our communities as well, other people. And so that's something I really think about a lot when I do my art. And in terms of Afrofuturism, I love that Philly is like, you know, very like vibrant and pulsing with this Afrofuturist, you know, movement, as you know, I guess you could say. And I think as Black artists, that we are creating new histories. So at once, let me see if I can so it's something that is about the future, like the present of like this future, and how I'm going to stop because I'm like rambling. But yeah, what else did you say about the other question?
I guess just opening up if there's like particularly things that resonated with you. Like I know something that's talked about in the essay that we talked about, and I think it's maybe in the artist statement too, about how you first started drawing because you were like doodling in church.
Yes, thank you for, yes. I think definitely. So that church experience, the Black church experience definitely is, my mother would, because we had Sunday school, but we still had to go to service. So we were at church all day, you know, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And my mom would carry those little, she worked in an office. She worked for the state for a long time, and she would, you know, bring office supplies home. She's retired now, so she's not going to get in trouble for this. But so, you know, the like little yellow legal pads. So she would always give those to me, and pens, and I would just doodle while I was in church, oftentimes, like not really understanding what the sermon was about, but understanding the feeling of being in church, and the spirit moving, and the music. So yeah, so that's also one of my foundations. And in my work, I do a lot of repetition in terms of like just types of lines, shapes, over and over again to try and create a new whole, if you will. And yeah, I think there's like lots to get. Yeah, you can direct me, you know, to answer any other questions. But
something that I was thinking about, like, and thinking of the idea of the show, like ritual and rhythm. And this is something that, again, is like written about in the essay, like rhythm is also a design term to describe when something repeats over and over again visually. And it kind of creates like a visual unity. And something that I mean, you can look at almost any culture, but things that have a lot of spiritual value that are like crafted often have like a lot of repetition to them. Like you can see that the process of making them is so ritualized, but also there's something so kind of like profound about seeing something that's so like, you know, just iterated over and over and over and over again. So I guess if that's something that you feel like is particularly, is that something that you feel like is related to the way that you draw? And also you make like a ton of work too. So on top of that, not just each drawing, but just like the amount of work that you have as well.
Say your question one more time.
Yeah, I guess
I was just like late in the day for me, but go ahead, sorry.
That's fine. I guess I don't know how much like where exactly the question is, but
Right. Okay.
just like the way that repetition kind of can reflect spirituality. Like I don't know if you feel like what you do now is a spiritual practice or if it's like morphed into other things at this point.
I do. There are moments when I do find the spirit when I do my work. And I think it does have to do with like repetition, because repetition can take you to a meditative state, right? It can become like the singular sound or the singular gesture, and you can immerse yourself in it. You know, it surrounds you. So, yeah, I call it getting into the zone. So I do, that is like a part of my practice. And however it's going to sound, is to commune with the spirit, because, you know, because I think there are different ways to do that, to speak to the things that are outside of ourselves. And yeah, repetition too, also for me personally in my growth, builds mastery of a certain technique. You know, if you keep doing it, and as a parent, you know, I tell my daughter that, look, you got to practice, you got to keep doing it, and for you, you know, to master it and then move on to something else, to master some other type of technique or gesture or sound. So yeah, there are like multiple layers, you know, and thinking about, like you had mentioned earlier about music. Sometimes I would do drawings based on the beat of the beat of a song that I'm listening to. And yeah, it is like a foundation of a lot of things that I do.
Something that was interesting, like I think about the idea of ritual rhythm and how it relates to all of your practices is like the idea that, you know, like the scale of those two things, or I guess they're not really two different things, but like the scale of repetitions, like if you think about music and pitch, like frequencies are just repetitions of like, I don't know exactly, I'm not a scientist, but you know, they go like this. So there's like repetitions in that way. Like pitch is like a very, very, very fast repetition. Thinking about rituals being, I mean, there's obviously different scales. Some are like once in a lifetime, some are multi-generational, some are weekly, daily, you know. Yeah, just thinking like, how do those things manifest in different ways in our lives? And I think that's something that all of you have thought, I think at least a good amount about. Something I would be curious though, and I would like to kind of hear from everyone about this to get a chance to answer it, is what does the idea of ritual and rhythm mean to you, and has participating in this show and seeing other people's work changed the way that you thought about those things from maybe beforehand to now?
I wanted to hop in real quick and just say to Kara that once you mentioned that you created drawings from the beat of music, I was like, what? Like, that is Black technology right there. Like, even just what we're talking about, like, that is insane to me. I just think that's really cool. But in regards to what you just asked, I feel like right now in my life, I'm coming to a part where I'm really interested in what will develop within me when I make everything that I do a true practice. And that's something I've never really had access to, because I didn't go to college. I didn't have access, and I definitely did not go to college for music, because I have Haitian parents. No way. They were like, you want to be a musician? Ha! That is hilarious. Try again, you're gonna be a nurse. And like, I tried to do that and then got kicked out of nursing school. That's a whole other story. But just like knowing that practice is something that is so integral for all of us, whether it's something we were introduced through college or education, whatever it is, or just having community that you can practice with. And so I feel like ritual, rhythm, practice, like all of those things go together for me. And like for me, when I talk about practice, I mean like really spending time to develop everything that I do, everything that's important to me. So like my meditation practice, I try to make sure that I meditate every single day. And that's something I've been doing for at least like 3 years now. Like some off and on of like, I didn't have access to certain things or like wasn't in the space to, but for almost every single day of my life in the last 3 years, I've been meditating. And like with my music, like I've been trying to get into making sure I practice my guitar every single day, even if it's just for 30 minutes, or writing, like messing around with lyrics and like making sure it's a practice that my mind is moving in those ways and being given an invitation to create something, because I really do think it is an invitation. Like we are creators naturally, but stagnancy is something that can happen really easily without our consent, especially with everything that we're all moving through just as people. It's so easy to lose connection with whatever it is that you do, whether it's you haven't made a drawing in months or you haven't made any music in weeks. Like it's so easy to feel like if I'm not constantly producing, then I'm not who I say I am. And so I've been leaning more into my practice, where there are a lot of things that I do that people aren't going to see right now. And even just like with the concept of being seen and with Instagram, I've been feeling like really disconnected with Instagram lately, and just feeling like everything's just an ad. Like everyone's just advertising their lives, and it just feels like it just doesn't feel authentic. And it's not to say that there aren't people who are using it in authentic ways. And like even having this opportunity to have space within this gallery, like this is a really cool and unique way to use this platform that I'm really appreciative to be a part of. But it's just like on a day-to-day, that is something that I've been feeling disconnected with. And it's been one of our main platforms for sharing our art, especially right now when we're not having access to, you know, public gatherings and art events and things like that. And I'm hoping that, I'm not really hoping, but I'm interested in what it's going to look like as things open up eventually. Like what parts of these events and gatherings are going to remain the same, and what parts are we going to be like, after all this time of not doing this, I know that I don't want to bring this back. And that kind of went off from your question, but like in general, I just feel like when we can honor the fact that this is something that is going to take time and patience and grace and repetition, like actually doing it over and over and over and over again, and seeing what happens each time, and being open for it to be different each time, because I think that's another thing that we don't really consider within repetition, that we can repeat something, but it doesn't mean that the result is always the same, you know? And a lot of the time when we are repeating something, it is going to yield many different results, so that we can look at it all and stand back and be like, oh, okay, that's what this means when I do this, or that's how I feel when I do this, or that's the reaction, the response that I get from others when they see what I do. So that's my bit.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been, I guess, meditating slash just because the space that I'm finding myself in is forcing me to write a lot about what I do as an artist, which, you know, it's another conversation. But thinking about the ideas of ritual and rhythm, and I guess how I relate to those is, you know, if my goal, for lack of a better way of explaining it, is to like connect to the source, or to connect to something, you know what I mean? Like whatever that thing in all of us that connects us in this human thing, that's also connected to this other primal whatever, I don't really know. But it feels like, at least for me, rhythm is like the pathway of getting there. you know, the idea of like, I mean, rhythm from the sense of like rhythm from a drum beat, rhythm in the sense of like BPM, rhythm in the sense of just like the speed in which you draw, or the speed in which you're sort of making those observations, or just like I mean, because I'm making so much time-based work, you know, rhythm is huge. Either, you know, I work kind of somewhere between a filmmaker and a DJ for some of the work that I'm doing now. And, you know, editing, editing film and DJing music, same thing. And they're both dealing with rhythm and time and sort of interruptions and blends. And it's like, if rhythm is the pathway, you know, to connect to the source, or the way I'm thinking about it, then the ritual is sort of the practice, or the submission that you do to sort of create those pathways in your brain and your spirit, and to create those pathways with other people, of like getting there, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe you don't always, I think about ritual in the sense of sessions, or ritual in the sense of rites of passage, or ritual in the sense of like y'all were saying, sort of repetition and sort of revisiting something over and over. And like it's almost like the you know, the thing they say about trauma, where like trauma makes something more real to you in a way. It's something about ritual that plays in a similar way, where like the ritual of something like solidifies it in your mind, and also solidifies the practice that you're doing, you know, both the practice of making the time to practice, and the practice you're doing of like doing the same thing over and over, whatever that craft is. And, you know, the sort of how that is generative in itself, you know, you're sort of like repeating that ritual of like getting more in sync with the rhythm, and more in sync with whatever that sort of, you know, I think for us, we're all working in different mediums, so rhythm means something really different. But it's like that practice of getting into the rhythm often and always, and getting into that flow that's taking you into that source, is really how I'm contextualizing some of that idea.
I think when you had asked me to be a part of this, I immediately was like, okay, you know, like I'm doing these digitizations that are very ritualistic in how I do them, and it sort of clicked. But it wasn't until I saw my work in the context of the show that, you know, I do talk about my work as Afrofuturist. However, a lot of the, like, what I'm doing specifically, especially with the work that's featured in the show, is historic preservation. But like, it really forced me to think about how could practice or ritual rhythm be the space in between, like a history and future dialectic, or a history future space. And I think it's been really interesting to hear everybody talk about, you know, how repetition and how rhythm plays into their work. And it's making me think about like how in my practice I can, you know, push the futurist part of it. And the way where I do my work, or how I'm doing right now, I do it under an umbrella I'm calling Memory Studio. And the goal of it is basically to be the makerspace of the type of work I'm producing, and where I'm trying to find these missing links. And I have sort of a formula that I came up with to do that in. And it's material, culture, or oral tradition, history, blah, 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 plus Sankofa, or going back and getting it, and then plus Memory Studio, the making of something itself. And then the last part is action, or, you know, committing to a practice, or activism, or advocacy, or, you know, gathering in community and pushing the work forward. And I feel like being a part of this show has showed me what the action part, what that final piece of this history future scenario could look like, because everybody sort of has this repetitive practice or process, or you know, way of thinking about their work in such a real-time, future-focused way that I think is really cool.
I'm realizing that I'm very antsy when it comes to rhythm, or when it comes to ritual. What was I just thinking? Something about undercover rhythm. Maybe thinking about. So Kara, you mentioned like mastery, right? And so of course, rhythm and ritual to me automatically brings up the idea of discipline. And so maybe I'm thinking about like accidental discipline. because the thing is just happening. Because I know if I sit down to like write very specifically something each day, it's not going to happen. I don't like it. Or yeah, I should say that my body doesn't like to do the thing over and over again. Even if I know the outcome is going to be different, it sort of has to be covert. And so maybe I can think of tricking myself, or maybe I can think of burying it, or maybe I can think of, making it muddy. And I think about my relationship to sound a lot in the way that there are very specific rhythms that are happening, but there's also like just mess, disgusting mess on top of it. And so maybe that kind of layering of a thing constantly sort of allows me to build a kind of discipline, but it also keeps me distant enough not to be like, I'm doing a thing very, very specifically. And I don't know that I like it. I mean, I know I like what happens, but I don't know that I like it in terms of like explaining, being able to like categorize what kind of ritual I'm doing, what kind of rhythm I'm working with. But it is fun. And I think fun has to be a part of every ritual and rhythm that I work inside of, definitely.
Kara, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Ra when you were talking about like not liking certain aspects of, I guess, your discipline, or I guess your covert discipline. I don't know if that's the right thing, but yeah, I just wanted to talk about like the tension that sometimes comes even when you are doing your art practice, like the uncomfortable moments where you're like, where is this going and what am I doing? It's sometimes it can feel in that ritual process that you're like, I don't know, something else is moving you, like, and it just, I don't know. And I really relate to when you were in the beginning talking about like your three selves. I call them alters. And like I lived with 5 of them at one point in my life, and I had 5 different selves who helped me to carry out daily, daily tasks. And now being fully integrated, it's like I can still see them, being a part of my artwork and the things that I do. So because they're, it involves like working with mixed media, for example. There's a reason why I like it, and I can't quite like explain why, but I think it's all the selves that I have within me like to use these different materials and bring it together to be integrative. Sorry if that sounds like new agey or something, but yeah. So
I think I'm a little bit curious from all y'all. Just thinking about hearing all how you're thinking about ritual and hearing how y'all are thinking about practice. And I'm really curious to how much of your own process is just like waiting in the dark. Just to be bold, my whole process is waiting in the dark. Just to put that out there. Not whole process, but it's a lot of just like, which is hard, really, really hard, of like not having the answer, before the question is formulating, and just like spending time with the question and interrogating the question, maybe to know emotionally satisfying results.
I feel like for me, waiting in the dark is a huge part of the process, because even just looking at not only my artistic practice, but all of yours, it seems like possession is a huge part of it, where something just comes over you, whether it's an energy, an altar, just whatever it is. There's just this energy of being drawn or compelled to do something. And that's not really something you can force. It's not really something that you can schedule and be like, oh, I'm going to be possessed for 30 minutes today. Like, it's not really something that you can really, really put in a place of constriction. And so I feel like art is always asking for conversation. It's always asking for space to experiment. So I feel like a lot of the time I'm in the dark per se, because like, I'm not very good at just sitting down and be like, I'm going to write a song and like, just write one. Like, I'm not very good at that. I know people who are good at that they could receive the prompt or be like, all right, I'm going to write a song today, and we'll just do it. But that's something that it's never been natural for me. Everything that I feel like I'm really inspired by within my own artistic work is really random, or just came over me, or I feel like source, is moving through me, or like these energies are moving through me, whatever it is that you call it. Like, and I feel like most of us have experience with that, whether it's a literal possession, even like thinking about witnessing Ra and their performances. I feel like I see it's a possession, like straight up possession. I'm like, I don't know who's over there right now, but I'm glad that I'm witnessing it. And like, the point is not to figure out who it is or what it is or what the purpose even is. It's just to witness. And I feel like being in the dark and being open to receiving that kind of inspiration is always about witnessing and surrendering to whatever wants to be expressed through you. So
it took me, I think, about 4 years to put a name to Memory Studio and to actually like get into the practice I wanted. I knew I wanted to do something with heritage, but I didn't know what. And then I realized over time that in order to embody a cultural heritage, you have to live and, almost through some ancestral knowledge, through fluidity, arrive at what cultural heritage means to you. And that requires experiencing life and, like learning more and things like that. So when I started doing these digitizations, I was sort of like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna, I would stumble across something in an archive that I was really mad that was in the archive in the way it was because, colonialism. But I was like, I'm gonna challenge this and I'm going to claim it or reclaim it because it's somewhere it's not supposed to be. And I'm going to see if I can breathe a new life into it. And like the pieces that I have featured in the show took months because I would just, I would make the craft table, like all the features that would be in the piece. And I would just let it sit there and like, watch it and wait for it to, almost tell me, this is how we're going to do this. This is a process we're going to, use to create these things. And this is how we're going to create the result. And, at first I was like, why is this taking me so long? I'm working off of a reference. But it's part of that process piece. It's part of the fact that I'm trying to activate the practice, doing it itself, as opposed to just like work towards the end result, because I wanted all of that to be, the end result to be absorbed with the labor, the energy, and, the materials that informs me to make it happen.
Yeah, does anyone else? Okay.
I guess I would say like I guess like what you were saying, Rashid, is like my entire practice seems like it is darkness as well. And I don't have a desire to ever come out of that. And what usually happens is like the work lives inside of the darkness, and then I sort of like take a small step out and ask questions that look like statements. And so when I'm explaining things about my practice or explaining things about the work and specificities and all of that, it's more like they're always questions. And they're always in relationship to that vastness, that sort of, I don't know, it's not the right phrase, but this sort of,
Well, I was going to ask Logan, like, what has your curatorial experience been like for this project?
I guess like specifically talking about the process from beginning to end, or just being able to like see all of the work together or could you narrow that question down a little bit?
Sure. Does anyone else want to jump in with a more specific question? No, I'll just like, I guess, well, how did you come up with the idea of this? Or did it kind of emerge just from looking at our artwork, or yeah?
Well, funnily enough, and I think I might have mentioned this to all of you at some point in our conversations, but so this is the second show for Snail, but this was actually the first show idea. And this actually came out of a conversation Ra and I were having with our friend Oliver, who's a musician. And I, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but in my memory of that moment, we were kind of talking about like, what is a way to talk about work where it doesn't, where it like feels exciting, and it feels like there's so many questions and more things to kind of talk about and observe. Like, I feel like as a curator, it's not like, oh, I'm picking a bunch of people and then I'll think of a theme that can kind of umbrella all of that. I'm really thinking like, how can the theme and the artist work in tandem? So I like kind of having an idea for a theme and then thinking of people, or thinking of people and then kind of putting the theme, like kind of putting them together at the same time. And also like, you know, I feel like with this show and with the Snail shows, they're so artist oriented to me, right? Like if other people see it and they react to it, that's great. But, you know, at the end of the day, I really want to do something where the artists feel like the themes are relating to their work and it's allowing them to think deeply about their practice and also about like other people's practice in such a way where, yeah, like that's really generative in one way or another. So I hope you all feel that way. And if not, you can, I guess, just let me know privately. Don't call me out on the video. That'd be embarrassing.
No, this is a great experience.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well, I actually think we're kind of wrapping up at this moment. I actually never know how to end these conversations. So if someone wants to have a final word, I give you the space to go for it. Otherwise, I don't know, we'll have to figure something out.
Wait, I do have a question, because in the essay you talked about how red came up. Can you talk a bit about that?
Look, there's not much to say. The color red just kept coming up. I mean, it was, and not, sometimes it's like, oh, here's some red, right? But sometimes it was just like, it's really, really red. I mean, that's maybe something I would ask you all. I mean, I just really felt like, wow, there's like some work where it's just really abundantly about red and redness. And, you know, colors exist in so many different contexts. Like you really can't make a particular point somewhere. It's like, well, red means this, so everyone using red is a reflection of this. But if someone does have a kind of point of view for what redness is and how that might relate to other people's works, I'd be so curious to hear it. I just observed it and pointed it out.
I mean, red is like a.
Well, for me, oh, you can go ahead.
Go for it. I can't remember the red in my piece, so I was gonna ramble for a bit. So it's all you.
Okay, well, for me, like with the photo shoot that I had shared to be a part of the gallery was, so I was embodying Ezili, and part of her embodiment, like there's 3 embodiments of her. And one of her embodiments is Ezili Je Rouge, which is of red, you know? And for me in that photo shoot, red was signifying power. It was signifying also divine rage, because she had so much anger, and like she had such a huge role within the Haitian Revolution. And obviously that shit was infuriating. And there was a lot of just power and violence, like divine violence that needed to happen to make Haiti be the first independent Black republic, you know? And so I feel like for me, it just signified power. It signified groundedness. Because even when we think about like chakra systems and the root chakra being red, and that has to do with being grounded in your root, your power. And so I feel like and also just like your sexual power, your creative power, and both of those things being together in one. And so I feel like for me, it just, and also knowing that like when we see red, it's like a signifier of like, pay attention. Like you see a red car, you see a red bird, you see like things that are red, I feel like stand out in a different way. And that doesn't mean that other colors don't stand out in certain ways, but like red kind of has like an alert signal, even within nature. Like if you see a plant that is red, a lot of the time there are things signifying like, you need to look at me, like you need to make sure you see me, because like this is not by accident that this color is here. And so that's what red really resonated for me, but obviously it can take on so many different capacities and embodiments. So
you made me think about also we like red as this as a foundation, like this color that, and I could, yeah, this color that is almost kind of universal. Like if you ever study like language or linguistic anthropology, for example, and how people come up with, how groups come up with codes or color codes, nearly every culture around the world has a word for Black, white, and red. And red is one of those like foundational colors. And so that made, yeah, you made me think about that, Sabrina, about like how it can, there's so many, because like on one, there's so many on the love, anger, rage, violence, life, vitality, etc. So I use when I think about it, I use a lot of red in my work. And it's interesting, it's not my preferred color to gravitate towards, like to wear, but I love painting with it because it can mean so many different things.
I think red makes me think of heat a lot. And I guess when thinking about like rhythm and repetition, I think sometimes it feels like when people mention those words, we're talking about like soothing or sort of like lulling and like coolness or like these cooler embodiments. And I think here in this exhibition, it feels like the red keeps it like a little bit more like punctuated and like hyperactive. Neither is better or worse, but sort of like that's sort of what I'm noticing. This kind of like, again, that pay attention, that sort of I'm losing language. Logan's used to this.
Yeah, well, thank you all again for being a part of this conversation. This was so great. I know this is going to be something I come back and listen to for, I mean, just many years into the future. You all had like so many great contributions. Thank you so much. I guess that's it.
All right, it was a pleasure, everyone.
Thanks for having it. It was a pleasure to meet y'all, the folks I haven't met.
Y'all are all amazing. I'm so grateful to be connected. And thank you, Logan, for all your time, your energy, your making this happen. Thank you, Rob, for this conversation, you know, like both of y'all. I think that this all became because of a conversation, you know. That's really beautiful.
Thank you. It was great to, you know, share space with you.
Yeah, I feel like I have so many more like artistic roots now, like people who are working in similar ways and also very different ways. It's exciting. So thank you, Logan, and also thank you everyone else.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers, y'all.
All right, peace. Yes.
Bye, everybody.
Can't do that. Oh my God. Bye.
Bye.